Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Eczema Podcast. I have a great guest for you today. She is our first pediatrician on the show. She also just launched her eczema course for babies and children. If you head to bit.ly/child eczema course and type in the code Eczema Conquerors, you'll get $100 off her course. I'll also put the link and the code in the description so that you can just click on it and head to her course page. I've had other dermatologists and other naturopaths on the show before who have worked with kids, but this is the first time I've had a pediatrician on the show. And she's not just a pediatrician, but she's an integrative pediatrician too. So I really love that about her. Her name is Dr. Anna Maria Temple. She owns her own integrative health clinic, and it's in North Carolina. I also saw clips where she was interviewed on Fox News and different news channels as well. So I am so thankful and so grateful to have her on the show today. And I just want to welcome you, Dr. Anna Maria.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Abby. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, it is such a pleasure to have you. I want to know more about how you got into becoming a pediatrician and especially how you got into becoming an integrative pediatrician, because I don't think there's too many out there, especially integrative pediatricians that actually focus on the skin.
And that is a true story. I actually, when I was 5 years old, I lived in Romania, in communist Romania. And at that time, I've always said for my entire career, I was like, I was 5 years old and I was playing with my dolls and I wanted to be a pediatrician. And recently somebody was like, that's really not enough. Like, there's got to be more to the story. And then I started thinking back, and really what was happening around that time is my sister was really sick and she had chronic abdominal pain, chronic belly issues. My mom would hold her all the time. She would be crying all the time. We were going to so many doctors and taking the most disgusting medications, because they thought we had worms and we had parasites. And anyway, nothing was working. And then they said she had a celiac disease, and my mom is trying to find gluten-free options in communist Romania in 1970s, which is like an unbelievable feat. And my sister didn't like anything. She was picky. She hated everything. Anyway, and I really think looking back through what was going on is that I was always looking at my dolls and I was like, one day I can do more than just help my baby dolls. One day I'll be able to help kids be without pain. Because all throughout my childhood, I just heard pain in the background. And I never really realized it until last weekend, which is like insane. I think you block some things out of your mind. But, we came to the United States. My family and I immigrated in 1984 because being a doctor was one of the many reasons they wanted to escape communism, among other few other things. And anyway, with their help and stuff, I was able to accomplish my dream of becoming a pediatrician. I went to UNC Chapel Hill here in North Carolina for medical school. And fast forward to 2007, I was an accomplished doctor, 5 years into practice. I was married. I had 3 kids, and I had 3 chronically sick kids. All 3 of my kids were plagued by chronic disease. They were 2, 4, and 6. My 2-year-old had seasonal allergies that were so horrible that he couldn't go out for an Easter egg hunt, because if he stepped outside the doors in the spring, his eyes would swell shut, tears running down his face. He would be covered in hives and he would be writhing on the ground in pain. And then my daughter, who was sick, she was on daily inhaled steroids for her asthma, daily topical steroids for her eczema, and chronic allergy medications. And if she got a cold, she had ear infections or sinus infection. If she started scratching, her eczema would become infected and she would need antibiotics and some more steroids. And then I had my middle son, who was just annoying from birth. And then on top of having ADHD, he also had chronic snot, like the kind of snot that, when you see a kid with that kind of green boogers, you're like, who is this mother that is allowing this kid to walk out of the house? And there's just not enough tissues in Costco to take care of that disgusting nose. Anyway, one day, all 3 of my kids were on antibiotics. Yay. And I took them to the doctor to find out what is the root cause of this illness that they all keep having. And they told me well, the little one just has allergies, but, you know, he's on so many medicines. There's nothing else we can do for him except do allergy shots. He was 2 years old. My daughter, they were like, well, the princess, it's all right. She just has to take her daily inhaled steroids and her asthma will be under control. And she'll do her topical steroids and her eczema will be under control. And if she takes daily allergy medications, then her eczema will be under control and her asthma will be under control. So she'll be fine. She'll outgrow this because, you know what, kids will outgrow this. And then for my middle son, they're like, well, he's just disgusting. So, and I walked out of there that day. And I, as a doctor of 5 years at that time, I did not know what to do. I was lost. And as a mom, my mom's side was like, there's no way that the right answer is that these 3 children are destined to be on chronic medications for the rest of their lives. This cannot be their story. And a week later, I went to the kids' school where their nutritionist was giving a talk. And it was that day, 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, that the fog lifted and I understood the root cause of my kid's disease. All she talked about was sugar. And I went home and I went into my pantry after work Tuesday evening and to watch as my children watched in horror, I threw out the Lucky Charms, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, the orange crackers with peanut butter, because you know they're protein, the chocolate milk from lunch boxes, because you know that's calcium. I mean, you name a garbage food, we had it. I mean, we had Pop-Tarts. And on days that I felt like a good mom, we would do whatchamacallit, now I can't even think about it, not Uncrustables. Anyway, the fancier Pop-Tarts that you put icing on just for extra fun. And so I threw out all the garbage, and it was then that I became completely isolated and an outcast, even in my family. My husband was like, what are you doing? Like, kids are fun. They should have fun food. My family was like, okay, you've gone nuts. My friends were totally looking at me weird. And my 24 medical partners at that time were like, where is the medical evidence behind all this? And I could say at that point, I was like, I don't have the medical evidence, but I can tell you that removing garbage from my children's diet and replacing it with fruits and vegetables cannot be the wrong answer. And I, like many of the warrior mamas that probably listen to your podcast, I was like, this is the right thing to do and nothing will stop me. And over the next 5 years, because I didn't know, over the next 5 years, my kids came off their chronic meds. There were no more antibiotics, no more steroids, no more creams, nothing. And then by 2016, we moved to New Zealand where we had no healthcare, no doctors, no medical insurance, no medications, and my children thrived and they climbed the highest mountain and bungee jumped off the highest bridges. And we lived there for a year and a half and didn't even have to use Tylenol. Wow. Because that is the course of medicine. And over the time, over the 12 years that my children got better, and I'm watching food do its magic, my medical practice changed. I started giving different advice to my patients, and my mamas were asking different questions. So then I researched different things. And then, lo and behold, I found functional medicine. And in New Zealand, I was able to practice functional medicine because there's no malpractice. There's no patient satisfaction. There's no Google reviews. You just practice medicine how you think it's best. And my patients got better. And then I got certified in functional medicine. So now I have a degree that can actually say that vegetables are good for you,
That's amazing.
So that's how the story unfolded.
Wow. I just can't imagine how much you went through, especially with, having 3 kids going through so much. I only have one, and I feel like even if he went through something, that would already cause so much stress in me. And I cleared up a lot after giving birth to him. So I just can't imagine, having 3 times that and having 3 children. So really kudos to you for doing such a great job with your kids and helping them get off of medicine.
It's, and as you know, as a mama, when your children suffer, you will do anything, move mountains, because it is not okay for the babies. Like I'll suffer, whatever, I hurt. But if my babies are hurt or in danger, right? Like the mama lion, mama bear comes out and you're like, back off. I know what I need to be doing, right?
Yeah. And, my husband is kind of the same way, reacted in kind of the same way that your husband did. I mean, he saw me on my journey and how much food had helped me. So he was understanding, but, so I eat a lot cleaner than he does. I have a lot higher standards. So when I have those high standards for my son as well, like sometimes he just wants to be more lenient. And I'm just afraid for my son for going through what I went through of having super severe eczema.
It and it is, I always say to my patients and the families, I'm like, once you see, you can't unsee. Because once you see the power of food and the power of lifestyle changes, you really can't go back. And it becomes really difficult to actually try to assimilate with the rest of America, which, by the way, they're so sick. I'm sure you know that 1 in 5 children has eczema in 2020. That's insane. And Caucasians actually are 1 in 2. That's
Wow.
I know. And so, yeah, once you see the work that it's done for you, you can't expose, when it comes to your child, as I said, I'm like, well, I can't have them do the mistakes that I made. Right.
And what do we know why Caucasians are 1 in 2?
I don't, I had looked at, because actually in the Asian population, there is a lack of one of the digestive enzymes that is to digest histamine. So there's an actual histamine deficiency known in the Asian population. So I actually thought it was a lot higher for the Asian population than Caucasians. And the latest studies that I pulled out with the Caucasians were much higher. I am not sure at this time, except for the fact that, well, our lifestyles have become complete garbage.
That's very interesting. I had also interviewed someone recently, and he also did. I think he mentioned that there are also some papers that say that African Americans are also higher than Caucasians. So I was so interested by those statistics and to find out why as well.
And I think you can look at statistics in so many different ways. Like I can pull, the white guys and the black guys and the Asian guys, we can pull whoever we want to. The bottom line is that the rates of eczema have skyrocketed. In 1970, it was 1 in 14 if we look globally. And so now we're like, 1 in 5 or 1 in 2. It doesn't matter. It's exponential, and it's not okay.
So can you tell me why the rates of eczema have gone up so much?
There is obviously multifactorial, but because, everybody's like, what's the one thing? And I wish there was it's not one thing. But what's happened, in 1970, that's when fast food was invented and became very popular. High fructose corn syrup also started at that time. And if we start looking at the trends from the food industry, you'll see that every year new additives were added to food, from the sucralose, from aspartame to, you name a chemical, it was exponentially added. So I have a lot of dads especially who will say, I don't understand why you're worried about it. I used to eat the same way and I'm fine. Why would the children be different? And I'm here to tell you that the food from 30 years ago is not the same as the food of today. If we just look at Kellogg's cornflakes as an example, the organic cornflakes of today are the regular cornflakes from 30 years ago.
That's
great. Does that make sense? Yeah. So like the cornflakes today have artificial colors, artificial preservatives, sweeteners, and all this stuff. And then the organic ones are actually the original cornflakes that we used to have.
That's so interesting. And I know that a lot of our soil is really depleted of nutrients as well from now compared to 50 years ago. So that could also be a reason as well. So in your practice, when people come to see you, what's the first thing that you look at healing and treating in order to treat the whole body?
We do, and that's the difference in, I think a lot of people are not sure how we do function or integrative medicine versus traditional medicine. And in the traditional medicine aspect is you see the child, they have eczema, you look at their skin, you treat the skin. In integrative medicine, just like you said, we look at the whole child, and what we're looking at is that this child has inflammation, and his inflammation is showing up in his skin. And generally what I usually say is inside their gut is looking exactly what their skin looks like. Their skin is a mirror of what's going on the inside. And then we look at food, like we talked about. You're totally right about nutrient depletion in the soil, because we don't have zinc in the soil, and zinc deficiency is rampant. And I'll say probably one of the most deficient nutrients in children with eczema is zinc. The second one being vitamin D, because we don't go outside. Our children aren't electronics. We've become a sedentary and indoor society, so our children don't get vitamin D. In the town and areas where I've lived, we are not big fish eaters, because then you worry about mercury and all the other stuff. So a lot of people don't eat fish. So that's also low in vitamin D. We're low in magnesium. The soil is depleted of magnesium. And it's, a lot of folks say, well, I eat a lot of plants, and so my seeds have a lot of zinc and magnesium. I'm like, well, the plants don't make zinc and magnesium. They have to absorb it from the soil. And if the crops are not rotated, and if the soil is not fertilized properly, then that's a problem. We obviously make sure that the children have an organic diet, and we're decreased the pesticide and herbicides. Sleep is super important. A lot of people take sleep for granted. They're like, it's a waste of time. But when we sleep is when the body actually wakes up, our immune system wakes up and cleans house. If your body can't clean house, you're left with garbage, so we say, and your eczema flares up. And then stress, high cortisol. Stress leads to high cortisol levels. High cortisol levels make the body release histamines, which then trigger eczema. So those are just a few of the things that we look at, like when the kids come in.
And so I know that in some functional medicine practices, they'll run tests, at least for adults. I know sometimes they'll run tests like the GI map test or Oaks test. For children, do you do that type of stuff in your practice, or do you, mainly work on their diet, nutrition, and gut health?
Kids are a little easier, but when you come into my clinic, we do food allergy testing, and it's not the traditional allergist. We do food sensitivity. So we're going to look at IgE, which is the traditional thing that people know. I eat a peanut and I can't breathe, or I eat dairy and I have hives. So that's IgE. But we also test for IgG and complement. And what does that look like? Well, if you have an IgG issue, is like I eat dairy and 3 days later my skin has eczema. I eat gluten, and then 5 days later, my skin has eczema, because the body, when we talk sensitivities, it's delayed. So the body may take up to 9 days to manifest a reaction to a food, which makes it really hard when you're trying to keep a diary of what they were eating. So we do food sensitivity. It's been a game changer, because we have all these kids that have come in off dairy or off gluten and nothing is working, and we'll get the food sensitivity and rice pops up and nuts pop up, or, sometimes I have one kid, turkey. Turkey was the biggest issue. I would have never done that on an elimination diet. And then we do a poop test. And on the poop test, we look at, do you have digestive enzymes? How much inflammation? Do you even have the right bacteria in your gut? Do you have yeast? And so on and so forth.
What's that poop test called that you guys do?
Oh, we do the Doctor's Data is the company that we use.
Awesome. I know I'm going to get a lot of questions about that. And so have you noticed a pattern in the kids that you treat, whether, a pattern of certain foods or certain things that seem to be triggering them a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start in the blood work that we do, because we look for zinc deficiency, vitamin D, and iron. To narrow it down, and I see zinc deficiency, vitamin D deficiency across the board in kids with eczema, like we were talking about from the soil depletion and lack of sunshine. And then in the food allergy tests, food coloring, preservatives, sugar, dairy, and gluten are the top ones.
And I guess they're being fed those types of food consistently.
Yeah. And it's funny, because everybody goes, oh, well, I'll just get a food test. It's not going to be a big deal. I'm like, it is going to be a big deal, because they're going to be allergic to the foods they eat every single day. And you got to revamp the diet. Yeah.
So when you do the doctor's data test as well, do you notice any patterns with their bacteria, their gut health, things like that?
Yep. They're often the most often deficient species of bacteria is lactobacillus is missing, and especially lactobacillus rhamnosus is well studied in the literature for prevention of eczema, actually, which no one seems to be listening to me, because if my mamas would be taking lactobacillus rhamnosus, it would decrease their children's risk of having eczema by 50%. It's crazy to me. We're not talking about it. Yeah.
50%. That's a big number.
That's a huge number, and that was replicated. And these studies actually are coming out of New Zealand, which I was super excited about when I was there. But And then lack of digestive enzymes, because when the gut is really sick, the pancreas is not sick, but we have digestive enzymes that are built into our small intestine. And when the gut is sick, we don't have enough digestive enzymes. I see a ton of inflammation, and then a lack of secretory IgA, which is a very specific kind of immunoglobulin that allows for leaky gut to happen. So, and yeast overgrowth, especially in my kiddos that have had antibiotics for ear infections, for pneumonias, bronchitis, a lot of yeast.
Wow. So usually what's I know there's so many ways that you probably go about it, but what's the usual way that you'll start to treat them and help them recover?
Well, yeah, no, there's totally different ways, but that's actually why I put together an online course, because there is a pattern that works, and we do go of food is, well, first of all, mindset. I will tell you, mindset is first before anything else, because if people are like, yeah, I'll do it sometimes, don't even bother. We got to be in it to win it. And we need to change the lifestyle, and we need to change the food. And we start with the food first, because that's the number one biggest issue. If we don't change the food, nothing will work. And we have to be 100% at changing the food. And it's not just about eliminating foods. It's about taking foods away, but replacing the foods with important nutrients, because we can't take a whole food group from children. Then they're going to be malnourished, like, oh, what are they going to eat? Lettuce? And so we need to bring in nutritious foods. So then we remove the bad foods. We bring in some awesome foods. We deal with the picky eaters. We work on rotation, because the issue is when we eat the same thing every day. And I'm not sure about you, but I fall into a rut, and all of a sudden I'm eating the same thing for breakfast, and then my grocery list looks exactly the same every week. And so we fall in food ruts, and the body wants us to rotate food. So we teach them how to rotate foods. Then we start supplementing the deficient nutrients, like we talked about, be it digestive enzymes, zinc, vitamin D, and so on and so forth. And then we got to make sure the children are pooping every day, because if you don't poop, you can't detoxify. We make sure they're sleeping. And then we move on to, do we need to go into yeast treatment and gut rebuilding by using probiotics?
That's very interesting. So regarding the yeast treatment, is there certain supplements that you guys use for yeast treatment, or certain foods that they'll avoid for killing off the yeast?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Everybody goes and you said food too, which I really appreciate. And you and I are talking about the same thing. But a lot of people will go, what supplement do I use for yeast? And you cannot treat yeast unless you change your diet, because sugar feeds the yeast. And a lot of my mamas are like, oh, when I was pregnant, I was craving sugar and simple carbs, right? And it's like, oh, well, that's just pregnancy. No, that's actually yeast talking. And so you have yeast in your belly, and then you give it to the baby. And if we have to remove the simple sugars in order to then move to yeast treatment, because otherwise you're fertilizing the weed and trying to kill it at the same time. So you're just spending money, and nothing is getting better. So we would go through removal of high added sugar foods. I always want to caution people, because a lot of people will then Google Candida diet, and it's not appropriate for children, because that removes grains and beans. And I mean, you're left with meat and cooked vegetables, and that is just not an okay diet for children. So that's why you need somebody that does this, so that we can help you do it in a specific way, so the child doesn't become malnourished. But food first, and then we use herbal supplements second, and lastly, if we need to, we'll use antifungals to really kill it off if it's a problem.
How does this work for younger children? Because I have a lot of moms who listen as well, who have younger toddlers or babies. How do they get treated, especially if there's yeast issues or some of the other issues that you mentioned?
Yeah. So for the babies, we help moms with their diet, because, not only is mom food, but now mom's got to change her food to adjust for the baby's issues. So unfortunately, mom got to do one more thing. So we work with mom's diets, or if the baby is on formula, we have recommendations for specific formulas that are not full of garbage, that we can give nutrients without giving them corn syrup. Don't even get me started on formulas. But sometimes we need formulas, and it's no big thing. And then babies can take supplements there, but we have to do it very slowly. You can't, in integrative medicine, nothing moves fast. We got to do it nice and slow. The body knows what to do. We just have to give it the right tools and time. Time is key.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you mentioned, especially with time. It's hard to rush things, and I know a lot of moms are probably like, well, there's a lot of yeast in bread. Can I give my kid bread if there's yeast in it?
Right. And so that you would have to have like active yeast. So that yeast has been cooked, it's dead, it's fine. That's not the one we're going after. Good question. That's a good question. I get that all the time.
Okay, that's really good to hear. I know a lot of moms will be really happy to hear about that.
Yeah, it's more about the white bread and what the bread is made out of and how it breaks down into sugar rather than the yeast that it's used to rise the bread.
Okay, that's great. What about, so you mentioned vitamin D deficiency and zinc. What tools do you usually use to replenish those? I think you mentioned there's supplements. Are there any specific foods that you recommend for those as well?
Yeah, for my baby, so when you come in and you do your well checks, I do well babies as well, is we actually start talking nutrients from when they have solid foods. And an amazing food that most people don't eat is sardines. And everybody's like, that's disgusting, little fish without their heads. and I'm like, okay, here's the thing, people. Like, the babies don't know about the little fish without their heads. Like, take the fish out of its container and smush it up. And the baby doesn't know. It could be chicken. The baby has never seen the food. It's us who are like, oh my God, I can't eat sardines. Therefore, I can't give it to the baby. The baby doesn't know. Babies eat like pears with broccoli and, name something weird that we combine. And then we're like, oh, but we got to draw the line at sardines. But sardines are amazing omega-3s and amazing vitamin D. Totally underutilized. Eggs have vitamin D, not a lot, but they do have D. They also have vitamin B. They have choline. So I do love eggs. Again, we got to proceed cautiously in the children that are very atopic. So they're very flared up because egg is also high allergen food. So that's a fine balance. But eggs are a great food. Zinc is in chicken, in meats, in seeds, your pumpkin seeds, your sunflower seeds, and one of the biggest ones is oysters. So I have babies that eat oysters, they're eating sardines. Iron is in liver. I mean, in our culture, we're like, ew, chicken liver. In France, liver pate is like a delicacy, right?
Yeah.
No big deal in France. And I'm like, what? So the babies in my clinic eat amazing cuisines from around the world because that's how we get the good nutrients in them so they don't become deficient and then have issues with eczema.
That's great. Yeah, I really love everything that you just suggested. So oysters, are those cooked or raw?
Cooked.
I'm guessing they're cooked, but just
Cooked.
wanted to make sure.
Yeah. That's for the parents. The parents can do the raw oysters and the kids could do the cooked ones.
I also actually asked on social media as well if anyone had questions.
Yes.
So I'm just going to read to you quickly. I'll see if any more questions came in, but I'm just going to quickly read two questions. So one of them said, how do histamines affect eczema?
Wow, that is such a great question. One of my favorites. So histamines are like little confetti, if you will. And the histamines live in mast cells. So it's like little confetti living in balloons. And the balloons with confetti travel our body. And when they see an invader, they burst and the histamines release. And then they go and cause problems. But before we go how the histamines cause problems, want to talk about what stresses the mast cells. So if you have too many mast cells, that's a problem because you've made too many. Now they're ready to burst at any time. Things that burst mast cells are going to be pollen, cats, dogs, dust mites, cockroaches, different foods, intestinal infections, just stress, to name a few, hot and cold. So a lot of people will have eczema in the heat, and some other kids will have eczema in the cold. Those are stressors to the mast cells. In our body, we have histamine receptors. So those are going to be in our nose. When you get pollen, you get runny nose and runny eyes. We have histamine 2 receptors, the H2, that's in our belly. That's people that get reflux. And that's when you eat a lot of foods and you get reflux. That's a lot of times from histamines. And people who I'm sure now know not to take Zantac because of the carcinogen that is found in Zantac. But previously in Zantac is a H2 blocker, so it decreases your acid production by decreasing your histamine response. And H3, the third one, is in your brain. So when you get brain fog, you're irritable, you're moody, you're tired from pollen, just as an example, that's where the histamines are going into your brain. And then we have number 4, which is traveling your immune system, which is going to be where our eczema people get affected. And when the histamines burst, it goes right to the skin and it irritates everything in the skin.
And then is there anything we can do to prevent that? Do you recommend a low histamine diet or certain supplements for children and toddlers?
Well, yeah, so I'll tell you that in the low histamine diet, we're back to no preservatives. So high histamine foods, we'll start with that. High histamine foods are going to be processed foods. Anything in a package is going to be a high histamine food. Gluten and dairy are high histamine foods. Leftovers are often high histamine foods, as are fermented foods, which is unfortunate because they're also good in probiotics. So then you're in a catch-22. But don't go after the fermented foods. Go after the processed food first and then move down the line. Because, everybody's like, oh, well, I'll go with a fermented. No. The packaged foods are the number one issue because all those preservatives are histamine producing.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I'm sure, that answer helps a lot of people. What about, someone also asked, what vitamins do you recommend for gut health? And I know you did talk about probiotics. So is there anything else that you would add to that as well?
Well, I usually do like we said, vitamin D, zinc, omega-3s, and probiotics, and then digestive enzymes if you need those, depending on what's going on with your gut. So I would say those would be my top ones for gut health.
Awesome. And okay, so I have a bit of a touchy question. I don't know if you're actually allowed to answer this. I know that some naturopaths in my area are not allowed to. But I did have someone in my Facebook group. She said that her 6-month-old has eczema flare up, and she's wondering if she should get her vaccination. Her 6-month vaccination is coming up, and if she should get her vaccines for her. So I just wanted to know what you thought about this as well, because we definitely had a lot of mixed answers from the community, and of course that's not medical advice in the Facebook group. But yeah, I would love to know your thoughts. I'm not even sure if you're allowed to answer, but yeah.
I do, and I don't. One of the things I don't do is you and I talking about it. It's totally reasonable. It's people that send me messages on Facebook or Instagram. I won't answer anything because, unfortunately, the problem is that no one feels safe talking about it one way or the other. The biggest, often people say, "Oh, you're a pediatrician, then vaccines. What are your thoughts?" And I'm like, well, here's what my thoughts are. My thoughts are that we are no longer able to have a conversation about anything. If you're pro-vaccines, you have venom to spew towards the other side. If you're anti-vax, you have venom to spew towards the other side. And it's really difficult to have a conversation in the middle. So I'll tell you, I'm in the middle, and people and everyone, I'm like, and everybody hates me because when you're in the middle, like you don't have like the side. So I don't have like my people on either side. But here's the thing with vaccines. I do believe in vaccines. My children are vaccinated. I feel that their vaccines are good. They do have side effects, and they do have a lot of side effects. And I do think that we are too cookbook in the way we're doing vaccines. But I will tell you, when I was seeing patients, 28 patients a day in my clinic, it was impossible to do a personalized vaccine schedule for everybody. Not possible. And so you move in a giant medical system. You have to see patients every 10 minutes. You have to do cookbook medicine. The end. Now that I do integrative medicine, I do vaccines one at a time, and I'm able to see the reactions that happen. And I do have children that were totally fine and they got one vaccine, and I could see that they developed a skin issue that they never had before. And so then we pause, we let the body heal, and then we have a discussion on how to proceed further. But that's very hard to do in modern medicine because you can't have the discussion because you're automatically an anti-vaxxer. And people in medical school, we are not taught. We're taught about side effects, but very minimally, like there's a rash, there's a fever, irritability, we move on, no big deal. And I think that's a disservice to everybody because the vaccines have a bigger side effect profile than it's taught in medical school. And I get to see it. So I usually say if children are super inflamed, eczema is an inflammatory reaction. Vaccines are inflammatory. This is how they operate. This is not a good or bad. This is like you put a vaccine in, you put the antigen, and you create an irritation for the body to know that's a problem, so the body can come over here, develop antibodies, and protect you. If a child is in a major eczema flare, I say pause vaccines and wait till they are better before moving on with the vaccines. If that's not possible, because we know the political climate we live in, at least space them out. Do not give all vaccines at one time.
Thank you very much for that answer. I really appreciate it, especially because, especially with everything that's going on right now, there's a lot of, hesitancy because people don't know, who's right, who's wrong. But yeah, I agree. They do work for the important things that we need them for. But you're right. There are side effects as well that we have to watch out for.
I mean, to say, everything has side effects. Water has side effects. Tylenol is associated with eczema. So the more Tylenol you have, the more likely you are to develop eczema. Is anybody talking about that? No. Reflux meds. So like everything. So to me, it's, people get get very offended. Let me tell you something. I did a post on Chick-fil-A, and my post was that Chick-fil-A is fast food. And my question was, how often should children eat anti-foaming agents? Oh, it was on. I mean, it was like my head on the chopping block. Let's see if we can make me bleed. I mean, it was horrendous. And it was Chick-fil-A. So, vaccines are going to be even worse because, so it's a matter of having a conversation. We just look at the data and we see, and I'm not saying that everyone has side effects, and I'm not saying that everyone is fine. It's just every person is different and every human's body is different. And it's my job as a doctor to figure out what is right for your son, which may not be the same thing that's right for my child. And in cookbook medicine, we're not taking the time for so many reasons to actually look and do individualized medical care. And that is really where the benefit is, when we do it one-on-one.
Yeah, and I think that's really great what you said, and I'm glad that you mentioned that as well. So do you practice more as a pediatrician on the pediatrician side, or are you now part of like the integrative side where you're on the well, I guess here we have more like naturopaths, and then they wouldn't really be part of the healthcare system, the public healthcare system anymore?
So here I do both. I see kids from birth to 22. So I do like general pediatrics, but I do it with a functional medicine approach. In other words, let's talk about the minerals. Let's talk about the vitamins they're eating. Wow, you had a C-section. Let's talk about how we're going to build the baby's gut and the mama's gut, because that's part of them growing up and not having chronic disease. And the nice thing about doing integrative, I do both. I do holistic. And then I could also use traditional model stuff, because modern medicine is great. It has some amazing things. And sometimes we need modern medicine. And I'm not opposed to either one. And like you said before, there's not one right answer for everything. Everyone is different. So the nice that I sit in a back to the middle, I sit in a great position where I could use something from all sides and apply it to depending on the person sitting in front of me.
Awesome. And sorry, the purpose why I was wondering that is more for, I was just wondering like whether, I know I'm going to have questions about people who will want to see you after. So I was wondering if, they'd be covered under healthcare, or whether it would be private and they would have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah, well, that's an awesome one. We get that all the time. And I'm a cash-based practice only. Insurance here is to see me, to get covered by insurance, I would get $25 for my time spent with your child. And that's why in the traditional practice, you have to see 28 patients a day, because you're making $25 from the insurance. And I know the next question people are going to ask you, but where's all the money I'm paying going? Not to me. It is not going to me. It's going to the insurance companies. And so I'm a cash-based practice where we pay cash and we do the work we need to do, because unfortunately, insurance in the United States is for sick care. It is not well care. It is only like when you're sick, right? Like if you have a cold, that's when it covers you. But you want to go talk to your doctor about, hey, listen, I'm wondering about my child's picky eating. How should we, navigate this? You don't have that. How about I want to come to a class and learn about essential oils for my child? Insurance is not going to cover that. So that's why, so in well care, you learn all these different tools on how to stay well, but insurance is not going to cover it.
Oh, that's so interesting. I have to turn on my light in a second, but uh, I had a dermatologist who was just on my show, and he specializes in eczema, and he said he earns 3 to 4 times less than other dermatologists in his area because to specialize in eczema, it takes so much longer to be with a patient, and he actually spends time thinking about them at night, and like he can't sleep sometimes, and he earns 3 to 4 times less than his other dermatologists.
It is totally true. For me, it is important to me. That's one of the things that I learned in New Zealand, that when I had 1 hour appointments with my patients, we did so much great work. And it's the time, because in 10 minutes, what do you do in 10 minutes? You kind of go, oh, my kid, everyone comes in like, we eat great. We eat amazing. And I'm like, righto. And then we get to work, and then there's just all these things that need to be changed. But you walk in, you're like, I actually do have patients that come in and they say we eat absolute garbage. So that's very helpful. But you need an hour to change the diet, to change electronics, to deal with the stress. These poor mamas that are dealing with eczema, not only are you putting lotions and creams and trying to then you Googling hours and hours on Facebook groups and blogs on how to help your child because no one's listening to you. It is exhausting. So a lot of times our first few appointments are just de-stressing the mom because she is like beyond herself with all this amount of stress and mom guilt. I mean, can we talk about mom guilt for a second? Is insane, right? Like no one tells you when you have babies, they're like, oh, it's okay about what happens to your boobs and your butt. But the mom guilt, no one brings that up and tells you what's going to happen. And so you can't do that in a 10-minute situation.
I think the mom guilt is so important that you brought it up. There's also a research paper that came out that said eczema affects parents. Parents get it. Parents who have kids with eczema actually have the most stress out of all the other conditions like diabetes, cystic fibrosis, deafness, and it's like the leading cause of stress behind cancer.
Do you know that it's actually, that is really interesting. I agree with that. You know why? Because you see it. You see eczema, your child's bleeding. You can't even sleep at night. Cystic fibrosis, awful, terrible. But it's on the inside, you don't see it. ADHD, the kids are annoying. I have a kid with ADHD, so I can say that. The kids, they're annoying, hyperactive, right? But it's not pain. And all the other things you mentioned, that's not. Cancer is pain. Eczema is pain. And the bleeding and the scratches and they're deformed, like your skin's deformed. It is heart-wrenching. And yes, I 100% agree with you on that.
That's a really great point. I never thought of that, how it's because you can see it, you can feel it, it's everywhere. It affects you emotionally, physically. You see like flakes on the bed, you see blood sometimes. It's hard.
Yeah. And I mean, that as a mom, when you see that, even if the child doesn't have pain, you have pain because you're seeing them. But asthma is not, you can't see it. Like all these diabetes, you can't see it. And so it's not as difficult to stomach as when you see eczema.
Yeah, for sure. I have to do a whole separate episode on mom guilt one day because it's so much.
Girl. Yeah, we could absolutely do a whole episode on mom guilt. That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so do you have any last words for people who are going through this, or parents who are going through this, or I even have kids who listen to the show. So do you have any last words of advice?
Yeah, I just want to say, because there's so many people struggling with eczema and, there's not that many people that do integrative medicine, just like you said at the beginning. I put together an online course to guide parents and families on how to care for their children. And a lot of people go, oh, I know this stuff. Knowing and doing are two different things. And so what I did, with all the hundreds of patients that I've worked successfully, I put together a course. And we walk you through step by step on what you have to remove, how you bring stuff in. We're going to have Facebook group lives with my health coach and then with me. So then we can help you apply the principles, and we talk supplements, and we're going to talk about vaccines, and like all the stuff that we talked about here. We have it in an online course. So you can do it from the comfort of your own home. And then you have access to medical care that you might not otherwise have because you're far away from me, because seeing me is really pricey, but the eczema course is going to be significantly less pricey. So we're trying to remove barriers, because my mission is to help transform 10,000 children's lives in the next 12 months. And we can do it with an online course.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate everything that you're doing for the community as well. So do you actually offer distance consultations? Because that's another question I'm going to be asked a lot. And I'm sure people will reach out to you after as well. And they'll be like, do you offer distance consultations?
Yeah. So that's why we're doing that. I'm so glad you said that. That's why we're doing the eczema course, because you have to come into my clinic one time to be on North Carolina soil. Don't even get me started on this, but to be in North Carolina one time for us to then continue doing long distance FaceTime appointments. And that's how I get around the regulation, which great. Now I just put on YouTube. So somebody's going to be like, wait, hold on. So you do, but that's how we are trying to help that by doing an online course. But if your child is severely affected, you've tried all these things and you really want testing, you come and see me in person and we get it done. But then after that, then we work virtually.
That's so great. And yeah, I'm glad that you really mentioned that as well. And yeah, there's not that many integrative pediatricians out there, especially that focus on the skin.
Yes, agreed. It's like, it's eczema, is no big deal. It is. I'm with you. And the literature that you read, it is absolutely devastating. And do you know, here's another excellent fact, that last year we spent $37.7 billion in out-of-pocket expenses on eczema. Cancer was $4 billion.
Wow.
I know. Well, I mean, cancer is more covered, but but when you look the lotions and the potions and the probiotic and the supplement and continuing trying 1,000 things, it adds up.
And that's probably only for the States, right?
That is for the States.
And not even including other parts of the world like Canada or Asia, Europe.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was a great fact, by the way. Thank you for sharing that. and I just want to ask if there's where people can find you, because they're going to want to message you or either follow you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That would be awesome. So I put a ton of free content on Instagram, and it's at DRANA Maria Temple. And that's probably the easiest place, because I'm continuously putting out content on there for all illnesses, childhood stuff. Right now, coronavirus is hot. So all my TV appearances go on there, and all the facts and tidbits about that go there. And then my website that will take you into everything is dranamaria.com.
And when does your actual course launch?
March 30th.
Okay, so by the time this episode airs, your course will be out already and people can check it out and sign up for it as well.
That's right. And you can just use either the Instagram or the website that I just said, and all of it funnels right into the course. We're trying to make it as easy for people to get started and get their children's skin healed as quick as possible.
Awesome. And I just want to take the time to acknowledge everything that you shared today and everything that you're doing for the community. We really appreciate you, and we definitely need more people who do specialize in skin, especially in integrative medicine, to be able to help skin conditions like this. So I appreciate you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. And Abby, you're doing an awesome job and awesome service and spreading the message, because, it's one thing to have the message, but it's really, you're not doing much with the message unless you're able to share with other people. So I commend you on taking it's so much time and effort in trying to educate all the moms and bring all these experts together and trying to give people really good information so they can better prepare themselves to help their children. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your kind words.
Thank you.